Thanks for coming. I'm Tom Doherty. I'm with Allegheny Land Trust. And what I'd like to do tonight, most of you know a little bit about the project that we're talking about. This, what we believe is an extremely exciting conservation project for Bethel and Castle Shannon and really everybody in the surrounding area there. But first I want to talk to you a little bit about who we are, because there's some question, who's this Allegheny Land Trust? I know over the course of time there's been a lot of people looking at this property with different ideas and different things. Some crazier than others perhaps, but in any case, it's important to know who we are and why we're looking at this property, and then we'll talk about the project itself and then hear from you and what your thoughts are. Does that work? And then we'll also hear from Councilman Campbell, who will talk a little bit about Bethel's interest in the project. And I want to thank Councilman Harrison and Councilman Campbell for being here, and Chief, and Susan, and Bethel Park TV, and everybody else. So again, thanks. So Allegheny Land Trust, it's important to understand we're a nonprofit organization that exists solely to protect green space in Allegheny County. So you guys live in Bethel and Castle Shannon, most of you I'm sure. You don't have to look very far to see what's happening to our remaining green space. Even right here within a couple of miles within a mile or so of this property that we're talking about, the other pieces of green space in the last year or two have gotten leveled. So there's not a lot of this left. So, and that's the case here in this area. It's also the case all across Allegheny County. And just for an interesting little tidbit, the county's losing about 2,000 acres of green space a year. That's 3 square miles a year of green space. Anybody know what our population is doing at the same time? Population's still declining, but we're consuming 3 square miles of green space a year. That doesn't make any sense, because what that does is it changes the character of the area that we love. A lot of us appreciate the green space, appreciate what this county looks like for an urban county, but at 3 square miles a year, and for anybody that doesn't know, take that 3 square miles and combine it over the last the decade between 2010 and 2020, that's 10 years, right? So that's 30 square miles of green space. If you're familiar with Ross Township and McCandless, they're big townships in the North Hills. That's the size of those two combined. So there's not a whole lot of area the size of Ross Township and McCandless to be losing to development every year. So that's what Allegheny Land Trust does. That's who we are. And if I can move the slide forward. Let's see. Come on. There we go. So we've been around about 25 years. And as I've mentioned, our sole mission is to help local people save local land. So we don't do this on our own. We don't parachute into communities and just say we're going to do this. We go where there's a need. We go where the community supports it, and then we help to make it happen, or we make it happen. But we together make that kind of stuff happen. Like I said, we've been around a little over 25 years. We were created in response to that disappearing green space problem that I talked about, because it's been going on for a long time at that rate. We do have conservation projects across Allegheny County, but Allegheny County is really our focus. So there are other organizations that do this type of conservation work across the state or across the country, or even across the world. Our focus is just on Allegheny County. Thus far in our history, we've protected about 2,500 acres in 29 different municipalities. And that's, at this point, is almost 4 square miles, which is an area the size of Scott Township. So we're doing what we can to offset that trend of green space loss. So where are we? How many of you heard of us before this project? Okay, pretty good. At least half of the room has heard of us before we started talking to you about this project. As I mentioned, we're all across Allegheny County. If you look at the protected land that's there, that's the county parks and municipal parks. That's our newly developed wonderful trail system that's happening all across the county with rail trails and other types of trails. And then these are our primary conservation areas. We have about 40 different pieces of property now, but these 20 are the biggest and the ones that people might be most familiar with and that we invite people to come to and enjoy. The closest...
I cannot see that. Can that be... The print is too small for me to see it.
Well, there aren't many slides with that small print. I'm afraid I can't do anything about that for you right now. Oh, read them? Well, yes, why don't we give her a map? There we go, and then you can read them right there. Thank you. Yeah, that map is, there you go. Good, thank you. Excellent. So the closest one to here that you might be familiar with is Wingfield Pines, which is in Upper St. Clair. So a really cool conservation area. We do this for a number of different reasons, which I'll talk about later, but that one was wildlife habitat, was water sequestration, because it's on the banks of Chartiers Creek, and which absorbs tens of thousands, actually hundreds of thousands of gallons of floodwater every year to prevent downstream flooding. In addition, it's become a terrific wildlife habitat, one of the best birding spots in Allegheny County, and there's an abandoned mine drainage cleanup system at that property that takes 1,500 gallons of polluted mine water that used to flow out of the mine and into Chartiers Creek and passively cleans it and sends it into the creek clean. So that's the kind of work that we do, and that one I mentioned in detail because it's in St. Clair, not too far from here, over by the St. Clair Recreation Center on Mayview Road, if you know where that is. And there are others. Our largest is down here near McKeesport. It's called Dead Man's Hollow. It's 450 acres to give you the scope of areas that we manage. And the smallest on this map is probably 20 to 30 acres, although we do have some smaller properties that we've protected for other reasons. So if we look at what we do, there are 4 strategic pillars to the work that we do. And the first one is the one that I've been really talking about, and it's the main one. It's identifying significant pieces of green space that are at risk and protecting them, usually by acquiring them and permanently holding on to that property. Now, once we do that, we have to take care of it. We have to be good neighbors. So it would not be good. We're a nonprofit. We're an organization that relies on public support, private support, donations from individuals. So when we acquire these properties, which is our first strategic priority, the second one is to take care of them as good neighbors. So to steward that property both for the environment and for the community that's around it. So that involves a lot of things depending upon the property, but it involves invasive species removal, it might involve trash removal, it might involve building trails, it might involve improving habitat, it might involve putting an abandoned mine drainage system in, like I mentioned at Wingfield Pines. But taking care of our properties is our second strategic priority, because we won't go very far with achieving that first one if we can't do the second one and have our neighbors realize that we do the second one well. Okay? The third one, a little confusing, urban greening. It's a little bit like the first one, land conservation, except we're working increasingly in the city to look at, because, and I mean in the first ring suburbs or in the city itself, because for a long time, conservation in urban areas was overlooked. But we've identified for a lot of reasons that it's important to protect smaller parcels within the city as well, for the same reasons, but on an urban scale. Sometimes that includes community gardens, urban farming, things like that. And the fourth one is environmental education. So we have a science-trained staff of 2 science-trained certified science educators, and we conduct environmental education for people of all ages, whether it's small children in preschool up to adults. We do it in school, we do it on our properties, and other places around there, public events and other things. The reason we got into that is because to continue the kind of work that we're doing around conservation and land conservation, we need people to care about it and people to understand about it. And so we thought it was really important for the next generation to understand the importance of land protection and water and clean air and all the things that go along with it. And I'll talk a little bit more about the education staff, because this particular project, I think, has some really interesting educational opportunities or implications when you look at how it's recovered from what it was to what it is today, and also from a historical education standpoint, how it's really part of the fabric of the Bethel community, the history of the Bethel community. So that's kind of another neat piece of this project. So, any questions about us? I'm going to talk a little more about us, but any questions thus far? Good? Okay. So, we at Allegheny Land Trust and most of our supporters care about green space for the obvious reasons. It's important for recreation. It's important for animal habitat. It's important for scenic views. It's important for, just the quality of life in an area. But there are some people, believe it or not, that say, green space, I don't really care. What do I care about that? Why do I care? For those people, and I don't think there are any of those in the audience tonight, but for those people, it's important to recognize that we're dealing in this region, and certainly in Bethel and Castle Shannon, and all the surrounding communities really, but all across Allegheny County, we're dealing with some pretty serious issues that we read about increasingly in the paper every day. Landslides, flooding. Whoops, what do I do about that? Hold on. Thanks for tipping me off there. So landslides every day. It was in the news, it's been in the news this week. We're getting increasingly heavy rains. It's not a single day or week goes by that you don't hear about another road being closed, another house sliding over the hill. That's a big issue around here. Flooding. Last year, we all remember what happened in this very community and in Upper St. Clair last summer because of heavy rainfall. That how we manage green space has to do with landslides, and it has to do with flooding, and it has to do with combined sewer overflow, which you may or may not know is an issue in the area for our water quality. Has to do with clean air and clean water. Has to do with blight and community value and property values in the community. What we do with our green space impacts all those things. So even for people who say, green space isn't really that important to me, it should be, because how we manage our remaining green space will determine whether we help to mitigate some of these problems or whether we make them worse going forward. So that's just a little aside for other reasons other than the obvious to be concerned about and care about green space. So that's the end of my ALT piece. Again, any questions about us? I think the important things to take away: nonprofit, conservation organization, been around for 25 years, have a lot of credibility in what we do. We work all across the county, and we work with the communities in which we work to get things done. Yes, ma'am. Well, we're a small nonprofit. We have 9 full-time employees. We have our education staff uses some part-time facilitators, usually in the summer, maybe another 6 or so people that help put those programs on, but they're part-time people. And we rely on about 700 volunteers a year that are coordinated by our stewardship staff to get a lot of our work done.
Where is your main office?
Our office is in a little house in Sewickley.
Sewickley?
Yes.
That's a very expensive area.
It's a little house that we rent. You can come down and see it if you want. No, you're welcome to.
I can't drive very
Okay.
I just drive locally. Somebody would have to pick me up. I might volunteer in return, but I
Oh.
can't drive.
Well, we can talk about that later. If you really want to come down and see it, we can make that happen. So, moving to this project. I've talked to a number of you when you came in, and we've been talking to lots of people about it. We are so excited about the opportunity that this represents for the reasons that I was just mentioning before. It truly is. You can look at those words. I don't usually read the slide, but it's a unique opportunity to permanently protect one of the largest remaining green spaces in all the South Hills. That says it all, and it's true. And if you look at that, that's what it looked like before. That picture is circa 1939. So I'm sure all of you, because you live nearby, you know the history of that property. And ironically, because it was abused in the late 1800s, early 1900s, until about 1943 or 44, I think the mine ceased operation. But ironically, because it was abused and used as a dump for the mine, nobody touched it for a long time. Nobody wanted to go near it. Nature's done its work over the last 70 or so years to turn it back into a green space. And one of the reasons this is really exciting now is that, we don't want to wreck it again. Like, it's taken 80 years to recover, and it's an amazing recovery story. And we need to keep it that way. So, again, most of you probably can look at this map and pick your house out, so I don't need to talk too much about the property itself. But it's 40.51 acres, and I've already mentioned if it's not the largest remaining piece of green space, it's one of the largest remaining pieces of of privately held green space in this area. It's entirely within Bethel Park. It's tucked up in the north. I say northwest there. It's really sort of north to northeast. In fact, Councilman Campbell can point to it right there.
This is north, that's south, that's east, that's west. Here it is right here. Here's 88 coming right down.
Yeah.
That's where it is.
Yeah, and that map is misleading, as you said. So most people are usually looking north to the top, so you'd turn it the other way. But you know where it is because you live there. It's completely wooded. Significantly, it's at the headwaters of flood-prone Sawmill Run. So when I talked about one of the reasons that we protect land is to mitigate flooding, Sawmill Run, as most of you probably know, is a highly flood-prone watershed, a highly flood-prone stream. It's getting worse. On 88, on 51, the flooding is happening more and more severely, and there's a lot of attention being paid along that watershed to do all kinds of things to protect, to mitigate the flooding and improve the water quality and improve the area. So this fits into that very nicely. It has, as I already mentioned, this history, a really unique history of industry, and it's a real history of Bethel Park. You guys know there are several mining complexes, 2 big ones. This was one of the 2 big ones in the history of Bethel. That's something that we think, should be remembered. And as I've already mentioned, it's a remarkable display of how it's recovering. There's already, and how many of you hike it? I know a lot of you live really close. There's already a nice existing network of trails in there. And I'll tell you, when we started looking at this, usually, and I would give you, those of you that use it, credit, because usually when we would look at a piece of property like this that's so completely surrounded by development, it's usually kind of nasty. There's a lot of things dumped in there usually, and there's just a lot of, we talked about industrial abuse from the past, but there's usually like a lot of ongoing abuse. The property's usually worn out. There's usually a lot of cleanup. This property is nicely cleaned. The trails are nicely maintained, and so whoever's doing that by using it, congratulations to supporting the woods that are in your backyard. So, putting that thing down. I just love this. So, 1939. Nice to see the old car there. I don't know, somebody might know that's a Packard or a Hudson or whatever the heck it is. I'm not familiar with older cars. When Lindsay and I didn't introduce Lindsay Dill, I'm sorry, Lindsay is with ALT in the back. So when Lindsay and I went out to take some photographs, we decided to try to recreate this exact spot. That is at Connor Road, coming like from Mount Lebanon, and that's 88 as the cross street at the end there. Cemetery now would be right on the right-hand side. So we recreated 1939 to 2019. That's my car. It's a little Prius, and it's in the same spot as that other car was. And look at what sits there. That's really cool. I love that juxtaposition. And the property is special. So I've already mentioned there's a really interesting industrial history there, a natural and an environmental history there. And when you walk in there, for anybody that hasn't done it, it's shocking the number of birds, the number of natural trees and other types of plant life that have come back, the wildflowers. And it's funny, sometimes you write, some of you got the letter, right, that we sent. So you write the letter and you try to think, oh, how do I make this sound good, This one was really easy because that first paragraph or two is an absolutely true story. Lindsay and I drove out there one morning in May, I think it was, and we had been there before, of course, but the traffic was crazy and we were on 88 and we were fighting our way to get there, and it was, it was like it is sometimes. We pulled up there and we started walking in there. We weren't in there but 2 minutes, and you couldn't hear the traffic. You couldn't see any of the surrounding buildings. All we heard were birds, all kinds of birds. So it was really pretty cool. We turned the corner and there was this hawk. I think it's a Cooper's hawk, but it was cleaning food in the puddle on the trail up there. And we said, this is incredible, considering where it is. So it's a special place. And then we hired a really expensive outdoors-looking model to take some photos. And Lindsay made him look good. So yeah, just some shots for anybody that hasn't been in there recently. That's what sits up in that little corner. It's pretty cool.
That looks steep.
Well, there are some steep spots. So it's actually interesting. It's actually interesting. So most of the property, when you walk it, you can't tell that it was an old mine tailings pile. There is one ridge that remains up the middle, and that's it. And it just is a narrow ridge that goes out to the end. So that part of it's steep, the rest of it's not so steep. There's the steep part. And there's the not so steep part. And some of the trees and other things growing. So why, and we've already talked about this, so I probably don't need to read the slide. I'll take a look and see if there's anything up there that I haven't already said. But why is Allegheny Land Trust interested in doing this? And why do we think, and why does Bethel think, and why do community members that we've talked to think this is a good idea? We've already talked about preserving scenic beauty and wildlife habitat. We've talked about preserving much needed outdoor recreation close to your homes and for other residents of Bethel and Castle Shannon to have nearby. And the third point is something that's really important. Research shows that when homeowners, especially young homeowners, are looking for a place to call home, to buy a home and start to raise their families, one of the very highest things on the list of what they look for is proximity to green space and recreation. It's really important to people now. So when you look at, well, what's it going to do? In addition to having the recreation and the scenic beauty and things that you can enjoy, it also enhances property values. So because people are looking for this kind of thing, and when there's demand, property values rise. And studies, we've seen a variety of studies showing anywhere between 5% to 30% increase for property that is very near to green space. Permanently protected green space that people will know is always there. I mentioned earlier our environmental education team. We think there's an opportunity to bring small groups of students onto the site to talk about what it was before, what nature has done, to talk about the history and do small educational walks there. Talked about flooding. 3.2 million gallons a year is how much rainwater this property sequesters, slows down from flowing into Sawmill Run.
I didn't know what sequester.
Yeah, it sucks it up. Because when land is developed, the water, it rains and it runs right off fast. And it runs right off into the valleys, into the streams, and around here causes flash flooding really quickly. So every time we remove an acre or two of green space, we increase the speed with which rainwater goes into streams. And that's why we have the kind of flooding that we have. So when you protect an area like this, it's holding back, we estimate, 3.2 million gallons a year of rainwater. That's significant when you talk about your houses nearby and the other neighbors down Sawmill Run. This one won't mean much to most people, but it will to the council folks that are here. Municipalities are required by the state to file to have an MS4 plan, and what that basically is all municipalities across the state have to file a detailed plan on how they're going to, what actions they will take to help clean up the streams and water that's running off of their streets and running through their municipalities. And it's a point system, and you have to check certain boxes and do certain things, and you're required to take action to improve it. It's a good idea. It's hard for municipalities to do, though, because it's just another thing that people have to worry about. Protecting green space counts for points in that. So it's an important thing even for municipalities to think about. Traffic, density, hectic, all those kind of things. Reducing that is a reason for protecting this and why we're excited about it. Any questions? All right. So what your next question probably would be, or maybe you're thinking it, or you will shortly, is, okay, well, once we do this, what do we do with it? What's ALT? Yeah, most of you are neighbors to the property. What's Allegheny Land Trust going to do with this property? And my answer is very little. So we will own it in perpetuity. Because we're a conservation organization, and because we'll raise money with the promise that we'll be protecting this land, we can't, nor can any future, board or president of Allegheny Land Trust turn around and say, well, you know what, we're not interested in conservation anymore. We're interested in taking all those great properties that we have and selling them for apartments. We can't do that. So, because all of the money we raise is based on the fact that this property will be permanently protected. So once we own it, and it's protected forever. We'll work with every conservation area that I showed you on that map, and many of the ones that we have, in addition to those that aren't on the map, have a management plan. And what that means is that guides our stewardship team and the volunteers that they lead in how to steward and take care of that property. So what we will do shortly after we establish ownership is to create a management plan, and we'll have, we'll ask for community input. We'll ask, of course, for municipal input. We'll put our own conservation thoughts and ideas around it, because primarily, again, remember, we're doing this for conservation purposes. And we'll develop this plan. But what we see is that, what we know for sure, what I can tell you is we'll manage this almost exclusively as a conservation area. Don't expect ball fields, don't expect pavilions, don't expect skate parks or anything like that. That's not what we do. That's not why we buy property. If that was an interest, and the municipality is fully on board with that, they understand why we're doing this, so that's not what we do. So we manage things as a conservation area for the reasons that I already mentioned. So we anticipate very minimal changes or improvements. No, we don't own the property yet, so we don't have this management plan. We haven't asked for input yet, but we anticipate very low impact recreational uses that exist there today. Trails will probably work to improve the trails, mark the trails a bit so people don't get in there and get lost, clean up invasive species where they exist, maybe remove any major hazards that are there to make the area safer, although I didn't see a whole lot there really. And we, because of our importance of public visibility, will improve, it's our intent, to improve the visual appearance of the property along 88. So it looks like, that's the one area that probably doesn't look so good right now, and it's the area that everybody sees as they go by. So when we own it and we put the Allegheny Land Trust name on it, it's going to look nice. So that would be a main priority initially, was to improve the way the property looks from the road there. But to do this, we'll need support, and I already mentioned this, we'll need support from everyone here. So I know that the council has already expressed their support to work with us from time to time to lend the support of the Public Works Department where it makes sense and where it's appropriate. We'll hold volunteer events, and we'll form a friends group. And I think this particular property is particularly relevant or ripe for a friends group, because what the friends group is, our stewardship coordinator will have the management plan. She will make sure that the management plan happens, but it's really helpful to have a formal friends group in the community that says, yeah, we're on the friends group, and we look after the trails, and we know what the management plan is, and we work with the trail council, the land trust to make it happen. And the reason I said trail council is because the Montour Trail Council, if any of you are familiar with them, have friends groups for sections of the trail, and we follow that same kind of model. Okay? And I can't stress enough, when this really works well, and for us, I have to say it does most of the time, if not all the time, we have a collaborative relationship with the community and with the municipality. And because it's in all of our best interest to make sure that this property is protected and cared for in the best way. Yes, sir?
I know you don't have the management plan in place yet, but where do you foresee the entrances?
Yeah, good question. So you did say, yeah, we don't have the plan in place yet, but I think it's important, even in our early conversations in the office, we don't see this being a major draw. It's not big enough to put in a giant parking lot and to advertise the property and tell people to come and look at our website and come and hike it. It's open to whoever wants to come. So, we're not going to, you don't have to have a membership card or a Bethel Park or Castle Shannon access card to use it, but one of the ways that in organizations like us manage usage is we'll put a parking lot in because we have to, but it'll be our expectation is it'll be very small. 4 cars, 6 cars, that will limit the number of people that can effectively use the property at any given time. Where it'll be, don't know yet. There's a couple options. There's many options, but one of them could be at the very corner on 88. That's part of the parcel. Getting under the tracks or over the tracks is a potential issue there. They could do a little carve out somewhere along Valley Road, but we'll look at that. But again, I think the important thing to think of is don't picture a 50-car parking lot, because we don't want 50 people in there at any one time, because the area is too small for that. So I hope that, we're looking at a couple sites, but that's the best I can tell you now. Okay. So where does it stand right now? People have asked, right? And these facts are probably kind of important to kind of lock into your head right now. So we have the property under agreement. So most of you have purchased houses, you know how it works. We have an agreement of sale, it's signed, and it's contingent upon those first 5 things. And you'll notice that the first 2 have check marks. So the appraisal has come back, it's satisfactory to the sale price that we've negotiated. We've recently completed an acceptable phase 1 environmental assessment. So anytime we look at properties, anytime anybody looks at commercial property or conservation purpose or anything like that, you do an environmental assessment because you want to make sure you're not acquiring liabilities that will come back to bite you later. Now, we all know that was an abandoned mine tailings pile. And the skinny, or the bottom line on the environmental assessment is, if you leave it be, you won't have any environmental problems. If you stir it up, then you might have a whole different set of problems to deal with. So, as I've already said at least 2 or 3 times, we're going to leave it be. So from that perspective, the environmental assessment has come back clean. We're going through the title work. I think one of my earlier slides said there's a bunch of parcels, which means a bunch of different title searches. Don't expect any problems there, but that's just a formality that we have to wait to have happen, and hopefully nothing major in the history of the titles come back. And then successful fundraising. So this is the big hurdle, and for those of you that got the letter, I gave a little bit of an example of that, but I'll talk in a minute about that. But all those things have to happen by March of 2020, and that's what our agreement of sale is with the current owner. And if we make those things happen by 2020, March of 2020, that's when we anticipate closing and we own the property. And then we go forward with the management plan and the community input and the stewardship activities and the things that I already talked about. Okay? So the good news on this one is already, and I've already mentioned, Bethel Park Council is in full support of this, and that's really, really important. The Castle Shannon Council has issued a formal letter of support, which also is very important as a neighboring municipality. We have either already received or are in the process of receiving support from all of the state politicians. So Natalie Mihalik has issued a formal letter of support. I'm meeting with Pam Iovino next week. And so we're checking off all those bases. And that's important for the obvious reason, but also because of the next piece, which a large portion of our funding, if we're successful, will come from 2 state grants. And to get the state grants, you have to have the support of local officials, including the state senators and the state representatives. So we're working on that pretty diligently, and that's been very positive.
Do you need that money upfront before these state officials will give you whatever you're expecting from them?
Will we need them, is your question, will we get the state money before March of 2020? No, we'll probably have to cover some of that and then get reimbursed. The way the state grants work, they're reimbursement grants. So you raise the money, you do the deal, you prove you're strong enough, and if the project aligns with the projects that they want to fund, they'll reimburse you up to 50% of your expenses. So that's probably more detail than you need. That what you really need to know is that we have 2 major grant requests in, one with the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Resources, who is a fairly frequent funder of ours. They like the work we do and they support our projects, so we feel fairly good about that one. And then the Department of Community and Economic Development, which is another state agency and another state grant program. Again, significant grant request in with both of them, significant local support behind that. So we'll keep our fingers crossed on that. We work a lot with, we're fortunate to have a good track record with some of the local foundations, and so we've targeted some foundations for support, Pittsburgh area foundations, and also the municipality and potential other community groups in Bethel will be important for us to make up that piece of the package. And the final piece is individual contributions. So that's the community campaign, that's the letter you got, that's part of this meeting here tonight, is to kind of kick that off and ask for your help with that. And the reason those are important, I don't know if I included that or not, but the reason that's important is because when the state is looking at those grant requests and when foundations are looking at grant requests, they want to know if you have local support. And they always have to have match dollars. Not always the foundations. The foundations like to look at how many local people have donated because it demonstrates local support. The state likes to look at how many people have donated and how many dollars have you raised because you need matching dollars. So I already mentioned state grants, foundation grants, the municipality, local. We're approaching, the community foundation here in Bethel, some of the other local community organizations to ask for their support, and then the individual component. And if all those other things fall in place, then all we'll need from the individual component is about $35,000, which is a big lift, we recognize. But that's the target that we're shooting for from the community to help us put this whole thing together. Now, if any of those other sources that I mentioned don't come through, then that number changes and we have to look for other sources. But that's what we think we'll need at this point. And it's all, the question on timing was a good one because we have to have commitments, we have to have confidence that those things will come through by March of 2020 or we won't be able to move forward. But we feel good about it. This is a great project. We feel good about the grant requests. So let's talk about that $35,000. I already mentioned it's necessary to help close that funding gap that we have right now. It's required as a local match, and it helps us to demonstrate community support. So how can you help with it? One is you can make a donation yourself, and we would hope that you leave here feeling that the project is worth making a donation to help us make it happen. I'll reiterate, we're, in spite of the success that I talked about and the conservation areas that we have and the work that we do and how excited we get about the projects that we do, we're a small organization and we are a nonprofit organization and we require support from all different areas to make it happen. So we really do need your help to help make this happen. So you can make a donation. We hope you do. You can make it tonight. You can make it online. You can send it in. Think about what the right amount is, but we would appreciate that. Many of your council people have already indicated their willingness and pledged their willingness to support the project, and we thank them for that. Personally, support the project. I'd also ask you to talk it up. You came tonight, so you were interested in it. And many of you said before we started here that there was a lot of questions, and people weren't sure about what we were going to do and why we were doing it. Now you know. And I would say you now are the experts to go out to your neighbors in the community and say, okay, well, I was at this presentation and here's exactly what's happening. So and so I would ask you to do that. Talk it up. Talk about what you know and what we're planning on doing with it, and ask your friends and neighbors for support. Ask them to make a donation. And any other groups or businesses that you may be affiliated with, let me know about that so that we can go in and make this similar kind of presentation. We'll be presenting to the Bethel St. Clair Rotary and to the Bethel Lions Club in the coming months, and any other community organizations like that, garden clubs, other places that might be prone to support. If you have people if you're in those organizations yourself or you know people in them, let me know, because we would like to ask them for their support as well. And that's kind of it from the fundraising standpoint. How else can you help with this project? And I'll just look right through those bullet points there. Stay in touch. We asked you to sign an email sheet back there. If you haven't done that, I haven't tripped yet, which is quite amazing. Nor have I broken out into song, which is pretty amazing too, and you don't want to hear that. So stay in touch. Keep posted on the project. I already showed there's a lot of moving parts with this thing. So we'll send you emails. We'll keep you up to date. If you haven't heard from us for a while and say, I wonder what's going on, or I heard, my neighbor said, or something, give me a call. Call me or call Lindsay, and we'll tell you what we know. 412, what's our office number? 412-74. My business card's in the back. Lindsay's business card is in the back, but it's 412-741-2750. You'd think I would know my own office number, but I don't, because I never call it. Yeah. And once again, talk enthusiastically about the project. Be an ambassador for it. when we get to this point, I'm sure you will participate in community input sessions. And when we get to the last point, join the Friends group. Because you'll be part of the organization then. You'll be one of the 700 volunteers that we talked about, and it'll become 900 volunteers, hopefully. And you can be a part of this thing. Yes, ma'am.
My question is, I like the idea of this trust for this parcel of land.
Okay.
If I do a donation, is it guaranteed for this and not another project somewhere down the line?
Yes.
Is it going to be in writing so that I will have it? And I need something in writing.
I'll give it to you. We typically.
Tom says
Well,
it's for this particular project.
So your thank you note would typically say thank you for donating to the Bethel Green to help us preserve the Bethel Green. And if you need me to write something else, I'll be happy to do that for you. But it is what we do. Our management system, our computer management system has various accounts. And people make general donations or membership donations, which we can use to do all the things that we've talked about. Sometimes people donate just for education. Sometimes people donate for a specific project like this one. And when that money comes in, we code it to that account, and that's how we manage it. Yep. Yes.
Say you start fundraising, like you ask your friends or family, do you want them to like sign something so that you can have more numbers to turn into the state?
Oh, well, we would typically do that because they would donate online or they would send us a check, and then when we get those things in, we record them and we record them to this project. If somebody, you mean like if you were collecting cash from your friends, I would ask you to give me a list of who they are because for two reasons. One, we can add it to the numbers for state support, and we want to thank them. So, if you do it that way, we could, I would ask for their name. If they want to donate anonymously, they donate anonymously. We can't do anything about that. That's okay. But if somebody does make a cash donation, then we'll just record their name and count them in the numbers. But if they're willing to give their name and address, that does help because again, I'd like to thank them too.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks. Yeah, Dave. Oh, we absolutely will take anonymous donations, yes, if somebody prefers to do it that way. Yep.
But you have a goal of 35,000. Is that 35,000 to this project, or because an anonymous doesn't?
Well, the anonymous it might be I making an anonymous donation to the Bethel Park project, and we would that money would still go in, and we would record it into that account. It's just like if you have, I don't know, if you have a home improvement fund that you do at home, and you have your regular cash fund, you put certain money into it. That's the way we work it. But we're very careful about that because it's important to people and it makes sense. I mean, it also helps us going forward when we look at the money we have to spend on a particular project. We can't mix and match our monies, even from our perspective either. Yes, sir.
Does this include the land between 88 and the railroad?
A portion of it. So where the auto business sits now, that's a separate parcel. From where the auto business sits, and actually that parcel, their pavement is encroaching on this property. But from if you're coming out of the auto business facing 88 or looking across at the T station, from the end of the auto business to your left, over to Valley Drive is part of this parcel. So that corner is, but not all the way down 88.
Towards Connor.
Not towards Connor. It stops at the auto business. Okay. Now there are some slivers going the other way along between the tracks and 88 that oddly enough are part of this, which we wish weren't because we really don't want them. They're not really even attached to this, but you got to take the bad with the good. That might be an area for us to do nothing but clean up and, put a sign on it or whatever. But does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Talking about like the area that needs to be cleaned up, that's facing the road and talking about trail signs and things. And I realize this is in the future, once you acquire the land, once you close in 2020, but is there a way to make sure that you're part of donating man hours of labor, like your own labor, just to be out there and clean it up, or do you hire companies?
No. It's a mix. It depends on the project. So if a project is Most of our work can be done by volunteers. Some projects just aren't volunteer appropriate. They might require heavy equipment, or they might require, engineering work or something like that. Then we would contract out. But most of the work we do, I forget the hour number, Lindsay. I said we had about 700 volunteers, but I forget what that translated to in thousands of hours. And we do track those. I'm not sure if your question was. We do track those because organizations like when we talk about writing grants, either to foundations or to states, how many volunteer hours have you logged? How many? It's part of it is like a donation, so we track those as well. And that's more imperfect. It's kind of hard to track those sometimes, but we do.
I just want to make sure, like, if I am able to volunteer to help to clean up that area and do stuff, I don't want to be out there in person. Like, I don't want to miss out on that.
Yeah. Well, that's thank you for that, by the way. But we'll
But I realize that's the next year thing, but I'm jumping.
No, that's okay. No, so when we do our volunteer events, what we typically do is we do sign-in sheets, kind of like the one tonight. But that allows us, okay, we had these 11 people, and they were out there for 6 hours today. 66 hours that we record, and that helps us. That's an in-kind donation, is the way we record that. And we'll let you know about those, because now we have your email address, and when we go forward, you'll be part of the Friends group, and you'll just be on the regular communications. Yeah, Lindsay,
That's all I was gonna add, is that once we do have a property, if you're on our mailing list, either as an interested party for Bethel or as a volunteer, we send out e-blasts to say this is an event that's happening near you. If you're a volunteer interested in that, please come out and join us, or if you'd like to organize your own as a Friends of group, we allow that to happen. And that's, like Tom was saying, we rely on volunteers for all of our conservation areas to maintain and monitor the arts.
Yep. And you get guidance, so the Friends group would have usually they would have a leader of the Friends group, and that person would coordinate with Emily or Caitlin, who are our two stewardship people, the full-time that manage this work for us. Yeah.
You've obviously been through this with many other areas in the county, many other projects. What type of individual fundraising works best other than maybe going to community groups? I mean, have you seen in other areas where, different specific things have really
Yeah.
generated a lot of interest?
Yes, usually it's personal appeals. So what happens is, we will always do a direct mail, or two. So some of you received the direct mail letter. Oddly enough, some of you didn't. They were neighbors of the property. We'll take care of that. We gave you one tonight, but we may do another direct mail campaign. But in terms of what you might do, what usually starts to work best there is that you talk to your neighbors, you talk to your family, you talk to your employer, and don't overlook that. A lot of employers are interested in supporting these kind of community events. We'll give them the recognition, but it's really whatever contacts that you have, whether they're personal or business, and just ask.
Is it true if somebody donates like even $5 or $10, that helps because you just have another name that you can say to the state, well, this many people donated? I mean,
Yes.
no amount is really too
No, that's right. Every dollar matters. It really does. Every dollar matters, and every person that we add to the list helps. Yep, very true. Sir.
Hey, Tom, Robert Johnson, here, real quick, we do have the Bethel Park Community Foundation, so you guys are working, and certainly the group and other approaches for this one. Also, I do want to mention, I'm talking to Lindsay before the meeting, but that all of which is over one, basically a whole 100-some acre site,
450.
450
Yeah.
acre site. It was basically slated for a dump at one point, and the Allegheny Land Trust came in and really saved that site. My family is falling all over it, I know it very well. So this is a very, very worthy project. It's a very, very good group, and I would encourage all of us to get behind this and find this 35,000 people.
Thank you, Robert. Yeah. He was saying that this is a worthwhile project, and we're a reputable organization, and he urged everyone to get involved and try to help support it. Thanks for that.
Real quick.
Yeah.
Is it gonna be like a GoFundMe where you can track like how much you had raised or whatever, or do you have anything?
Well, good idea. Lindsay, what do you think? So you mean like we could put on the website a little thermometer or something like that? Yeah.
I don't know, that way you just don't vaguely donate and be like, oh, they need $10,000 more. I happen to have that.
Well, we can talk right after the meeting if you want. We don't need a thermometer for that. We can-
We do keep all the project news, you'll see in the, everybody's pretty cut out, we do have a pamphlet, this will help both you and then people that you're talking to about the project, remember the details about how many acres and what it looks like and all that. In here, there's a link to where we'll keep, project information updated, so we can add a thermometer to that site to say,
I do really like that idea, because we do it, Lindsay and I trudge out to all of our properties and all of our projects, new projects, and we put up a sign on the road and we do the thermometer, and then every now and then we go stick the piece of vinyl on it as the thermometer goes up. But it's a good idea, and Lindsay does all this work for us and does it really well, like on the website, and I'm going to say it's probably a pretty easy thing to do, and I think it's a great idea, and Lindsay will probably have that all taken care of, because I would have no idea how to do it. But I'm sure there's some way to do it, and I think it's a great idea. And we do it probably, well, we could do it for the whole amount that we need to raise, or we could do it for the 35,000, or maybe both. So they have a little dashboard there. I like it. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so we don't have a cool name like Dead Man's Hollow. But I have family out of state, so they're gonna have to go online to do this. Is that our name, Bethel Green?
Yeah, it's Bethel Green online. Yeah, Bethel Green. But what will happen if you go to if they just go to our website, the first thing at the top right now is a big banner that has, not a banner, like has some of these pictures, and it says, check out or donate to the Bethel Green project. So if they just go to our regular landing page right now, that's what they'll see. It's our highest priority project at the moment. Any other questions for me?
If I may, we would like to thank you for your presentation tonight and the time and effort that you've already expended and will expend to see if this comes to fruition. We appreciate that. And I'll just note that I've been involved in the Boy Scout program as long as I've been on council, which is over 40 years. And for a boy to get to the elite status of Eagle Scout, he has to identify a project, plan it, and complete it. And I can just see a lot of projects that are past benches, identifying the foliage, things like that.
That's a great idea.
So
Yeah.
that'll be a great opportunity. We'll have to remember when we get to that point.
Yeah, that's a really good, and a good thing to remember. And I think there's more than one Eagle Scout project there, probably. There's probably several.
And thank you very much. I think that now that people, and I hope they recognize, as was mentioned, that there's monies that this organization will come up with, monies that the municipality has to come up with, and then we're hoping that the public will be interested enough in this that they'll be willing to make financial contributions. So it's a beautiful asset to not only the neighborhood but to Bethel Park, and I think we have to support it to the extent possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman Harrison. Appreciate it. Yeah. And Councilman Campbell has some comments as well, I think.
Mine are quick. Scout's honor. I'm not going to talk that long. But just to let you know a little bit about myself first, I'm Tim Campbell. I'm new to the council. I'm probably the newest member on council so far. And my background, I'm born and raised in Bethel Park. I love this place. If you cut me, I bleed black and orange. That's just the nature of the beast. But I want to tell you a couple other things. My real job, the real hat that I wear, is I'm an internal medicine doctor. So I've got a very keen interest in doing what we can to preserve green spaces, improve the health, improve not only the mental health, but the physical health of everybody in Bethel Park across the board. When this proposition was first talked about, man, I was all over it like white on rice. I love the idea. I love the idea. Let me give you a little bit, I'm going to go back a little bit and tell you a little bit about the history of how this came to be, how it came to fruition, but also, a little bit of history about the property as well. 8 months ago, just before Thanksgiving, Municipal Council President Tim Mowry and I, we met for lunch. And we were bantering back a couple ideas back and forth, and he proposed the idea. He said, Tim, you know the old Molinaro number 3 mine? Yeah, the one down on 88. He said, I've been thinking about maybe talking with Allegheny Land Trust. I know a couple of people there. Let's see what we come with. What kind of fruit can come with this? I said, I think it's a wonderful idea. I think it'd be an absolutely wonderful idea. I knew it was about 40 acres. I thought, wouldn't it be cool? Wouldn't it be really, really cool to be able to take that property and conserve it and preserve it for all time and eternity? For all time and eternity. So we powwowed a little bit about it. And we mentioned before, you understand where the property is. If you're going down 88, right before you get to Connor Road, where it comes into a T there, near where the cemetery is, On the right hand of the side of the road, if you're headed north on 88, it's that property up behind well, pretty much from the road all the way up above the railroad tracks and above. And I remember, when I was very young, just being kind of a gray, dead area, not much up there, just a big mound. It hadn't really get covered until probably the last 20, 30 years. Do you know what tailings are? We've heard that word bounding around a little bit, tailings. Whenever they sink a mine, whenever they're taking a mine, there's a lot of stuff that comes out of there that's not coal. Red dog, shale, a lot of contaminated coal that you can't really burn, a lot of slag, other rock debris, and what they do is they just heap it up right outside the shaft. And that's where the shaft was. They kept dumping more and more of it until they had this huge mound of tailings that were in that area. It was actually run by the Pittsburgh Terminal and Railroad Coal Company. You won't hear that anymore. They went out of business quite a few years ago, quite a few decades ago. And they operated a lot of mines in the South Hills. Does anybody know how many mines were in this area, the area of Bethel Park? 13. 6 kind of underline Bethel Park in particular. You might know a couple of them. The Molliner number 3, that's the one we're talking about. Montour number 4, Montour number 10. Horning Road was I'll tell you in a sec, number 4. And do you remember the one over in Coverdale, up where Industrial Boulevard is? That was huge. That was a huge tailings right there. A lot of red dog in that area. And these mines, most of them were active until the 1930s. The Molinar mine, the one we're talking about today, it was worked from 1890s, mid 1890s to the late 1930s. Can you imagine being mined that long? And that was going on all underneath the Bethel Park, all under the South Hills. Amazing, amazing. The Molinar number 3 was one of the biggest ones. And we talked about where that property is. But again, I told you, I remember when I was growing up, we'd be driving up and down 88, and I remember that huge mound of austere, gray, dark rock. Nothing would grow on it. And did you see the pictures that Tom showed about the one trail? Nothing can grow on top of that one. They're going to kind of level it. Eventually, things will grow on top of it, but it's like a ready-made walking trail. It's beautiful. And Mother Nature did its job on it, didn't it? It really, truly did. Well, the boundaries of Bethel Park had changed over the last 80 years since this mine was worked. That site sits entirely within Pittsburgh 5th Ward. And that's the one Councilman Harrison represents, Pittsburgh, Bethel Park 5th Ward. Couple ideas I want to run by you as well. I've walked the place recently. I had the chance to go up there too. You saw the pictures. They're beautiful, aren't they? Just to give you an idea of some of the things I saw probably no less than 10 different species of trees. Some of them are huge. They're taller in this room. Beautiful, beautiful. A lot of underbrush, a lot of scrub, a lot of wild grasses, a different variety of grasses. I saw a box turtle there. All right? I've seen rabbits, more chipmunks and groundhogs than you could shake a stick at. I have not seen it, but I saw the deer print in the ground there as well. Now, any of you else have walked around it? Have you seen any other animals in that area? Turkey. Oh, you see turkeys all over Bethel Park. I've had 20 of them in my backyard, for goodness sake. All right. But it is an exciting place. White-tailed deer, box turtles, rabbits. Birds more than you could shake a proverbial stick at, no doubt. As I said, I'm new to council. I'm relatively wet behind the ears as far as this is concerned. But there's a lot of things that come to deliberation. Councilman Harrison, myself, and the other councilmen have to go through that require quite a bit of thought, quite a bit of deliberation. When this was proposed, and when I had a chance to go ahead and study this and look at this a little further, I thought, Tim, this is a no-brainer. This one is really a no-brainer. This is a conservatory. This will be a green space. This will be an area that will be protected for all time and eternity. And it just made perfect sense to me from the very beginning that this is something we should do as a community. We should absolutely do as a community. And it was good not only from the very beginning, but from all angles I look at it. And listening to a lot of folks talking, the overwhelming number of folks I talk to say, I'd like to support this. You saw that figure, $35,000 that we have to raise? From folks I've talked to, I could tell you already, I'm aware of about a third of that is already taken care of. That's the kind of groundswell this is taking place here in Bethel Park. That's the kind of interest that we see here in Bethel Park to make this happen. Even before it's kicked off the ground, probably a third of that $35,000 is already committed. So what do? How did this come to be? Well, you do some exploratory meetings. You meet with the Allegheny Land Trust, as we've heard from Tom. You mix in some feasibility studies. You throw in meetings with the property owner. You find fair and equitable price. You look for state, regional funding, as they said we're looking at right now. You got to get the lawyers involved. You know, they have to make sure everything's legal beagle. They love that. Run the idea in detail by municipal council. Let it, get their ideas, get their input, get their buy-in, and allow it to simmer for about 8 months, and voila, you've got a conservatory. You've got something that could really work. I'm so excited about this, folks. I really, truly am. Can you really fathom how rare this opportunity is and how fortunate we are that for almost 80 years this property was sitting fallow, and beautifully, wonderfully, subtly, gently, Mother Nature was taking it over and reclaiming it and re-beautifying it. So there's not a lot of work done. As Tom says, we don't want to dump a lot of property and assets and resources into this. We want to keep it as it is. We want to preserve it as a green space, a green way. How precious is that? Not only for us, but our children's children. That's priceless. That's priceless. The other thing I was impressed with too is Bethel Park, like most communities in the state, have to have a 10-year plan. We have to say, what are our projections? In order to do that, have you all heard of the Blueprint Bethel Park? Have you taken place in that? It's our 10-year plan. And where does that come from? The citizens. We went to all the citizens and said, give us your input. What information do you want? Tell us the things that you would like to see happen to Bethel Park in the next 10 years. And we were able to do that. We gathered information. Every time there was a community activity, there's a write-in on our website online, you could submit your ideas, what you like to do. And you know what came out of that? Folks were saying over and over again, we want more parks. We want to develop our rail trails. We want to go ahead and improve our sidewalks. Do what we can to do that. Developing walking programs in Bethel Park. We want to have connectors to our trails. This dovetailed exactly, hand in glove, exactly into what Bethel Parkers, our citizens, were telling municipal council to do. And we couldn't do it at any better rate. This is pennies on the dollar for this property, what we're getting. Truly. We have to do quite a bit of work yet. So it only does with taking care of that plan as far as the Bethel Park blueprint. But Tom mentioned also, we have a lot of mandates that are given to us from the feds, from the state, that says, you got to do a few more things. You got to mitigate flooding. And we saw that last year. We saw how much that hurt Bethel Park. Over 400 homes were affected in Bethel Park by the flooding. 400 homes. We want to do what we can to preserve that. Tom mentioned 3.2 million. That's with an M. Million gallons a year of water will be prevented or slowed from flooding down Sawmill Run, affecting our neighbors down the road. Are there other water retention plans that could be done with this? Can we mitigate also a lot of the sediment that comes out of out of Bethel Park? We're expected to do that. This MS4 program, Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. Try saying that 3 times fast. We're mandated by the state to do what we can to reduce the amount of sediment we have going down the streams, to separate our sanitary sewers from our storm sewers, to keep them separate. This project can help mitigate that. This project can help mitigate that. We will not bear, the municipality council said we're interested in supporting this, because again, it seemed like to us it was a no-brainer. It was an absolutely no-brainer. But we're not going to bear those costs alone. Allegheny Land Trust, they're going to bear some of those costs. They're going to contribute a lot of things to this program. We've submitted for grants. We're going to partner, as we said, to solicit donations. That $35,000 from the citizens of Bethel Park, from the businesses in Bethel Park, from the community members in Bethel Park, the organizations. And I could tell you in personal experience from folks I've talked to, we've got 1/3 of that taken care of already. We've got 1/3 of that taken care of already. It's a win-win. It's a true win-win. Are there obstacles yet? Sure. Tom outlined a lot of those. Is this insurmountable? Absolutely not. This is very doable. Very doable. Friedrich Nietzsche, I'm not really a fan of quoting German philosophers, but he once said, If you understand the why, you can endure the how. If you understand the why, you can endure the how. If we know why we're doing this, and Tom just pointed out over the last 40 minutes, 45 minutes, the why we do this, we can endure the how as a community, how we can make this happen as a community. And with that, I'm very excited to say the council, we're wholeheartedly behind this. We want to support it every way that we can. You know, but using the cherished, precious resources that we're given, we're trusted to do. We want to do it in a meaningful, secure way that has tangible results. And with that, I say group hug, everybody. You know? Any questions whatsoever, too, for myself or Tom, Councilman Harrison? Tom, do you want me to pass it back to you?
I don't need the microphone. I just want to thank everybody for coming, Councilman Campbell, Councilman Harrison, thanks for your comments, Chief, Susan, thanks for coming, and all of you for coming, and it appears to be your enthusiasm and support for the project. I would ask if you haven't given us your email address back there, do that, because we'll just do regular updates, like I mentioned, to keep you updated on what's going on with the project as we clear some of those hurdles. And Dave just handed me.
Will you come to the microphone?
Oh, yeah, I'm
please?
sorry.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was just wrapping up, Councilman Harrison, sorry about that, asking people to please sign the email sheet, provide their emails in the back so that we can keep everybody updated. Thanked everybody for coming. Thanked you and Councilman Campbell and Chief and Susan from staff here. And also, somebody handed me, Dave Wade is one of our supporters of Allegheny Land Trust. Dave and Sally are here, by the way, who are very active supporters. Sally is on our board, and Dave is a very active volunteer and otherwise financial supporters of ALT. So thanks for coming to you guys. So if anybody is interested in a check, Dave's comment was good. It was just the checks would be payable to Allegheny Land Trust. And in the memo line, be sure to write Bethel Green Project. And if you're asking anybody else to donate, you can do that too. So thanks. If there's no other questions, our cards are back there. Give us your email. Take my card. Take Lindsay's card. Call us. Send us an email if you have any questions, and look forward to working with you.